concerning local sightings here, I've personally seen two at one time maneuvering, and along with a third one later, and they looked and performed exactly like your video that you took that night that was broadcast.
Now, I'm not attacking anyone that's had sightings, but you know, there's a lot of atmospheric phenomena that can relate to. I'm beginning to sound like Phil Class here, but, but I mean, just to give.
Who live in glass houses don't.
Right. But I mean, just to give it a fair shake. In fact, what's that guy's name? Glenn Campbell wrote that Area 51 guide and brought up. I don't think he believes my story, but I think he brought up some very good points in there, and that a lot of that stuff can be mistaken. And if you're looking at something with the naked eye, a lot of times it can look like it jumps around and things like that, especially if you're staring at it for a long time. It all depends. It all depends how it's looked at. Obviously, if it's something dramatic, if something is close, if something makes a tremendous jump, a great distance, other than a little, you know, tiny white light that looks like the head of a pin, that's a different story. You know, and if that's what you saw, then that remains unexplained.
Well, that's what I'm referring to, because it was very close. Both of them were very close, and they would get brighter and darker, just like your videos. Sometimes almost strobed, and they were down on the ground, got bright, took off, and moved around. And my main question I was going to ask is that not all of the time the light was on. It seemed like when they were getting ready to take off, they'd power up, get very bright, take off. But when they were moving around, they could shut the lights completely off.
Now, they can't shut them off. What happened is the craft probably pitched with the bottom towards you, and it looked like the light was off, because you can't see the light from the bottom.
I see. Thanks.
Two questions. One is nuts and bolts, but why do they generate light? Why do you see any light at all?
Well, to just answer that one first is that's essentially operating like a fluorescent tube. Anywhere you have, you can take a powerful radio transmitter and you take a neon tube and you bring it near it, it's going to light up just because the atoms are getting excited and
it's certainly electrification of the surrounding air.
Right. You know, the electrons go to a high energy state, they drop down and release a photon, and that's what's going on.
Okay. And secondly, just to change the venue and force you to speculate, now that you had some time to think back on some things, do you want to elaborate any more on your ideas of what containers are? You know, why we refer to containers as containers?
I can't even guess. You know, all I can say is exactly the way it was written, and you know, because as soon as I speculate on something, you know, people are going to lean towards that way, and it's not fair.
Did those documents at all ascribe a purpose to why these genetic manipulations are being done?
No. You know, this was not a large briefing. I had 90% of the material that I read was dealing with my project, and when I mean briefings, I mean 2 sheets of paper as just the information I got on whatever else was going on, probably to alleviate, you know, my curiosity, and that was about it.
What do you know about the aurora? Is there anything about the aurora that you might attribute to?
Now, the aurora I did see once on the way out there, and the only reason I say it's an aurora, the aurora is I was told it by Dennis in the bus, and it makes an unbelievably loud sound, and I think when I heard it, I said it sounds like the sky is tearing. And from what I understand, it operates on a liquid methane powered engine. There's a lot of this information has gotten out in Aviation Week and Popular Science, and it looked, if this in fact was Aurora, it was certainly a strange aircraft. It looked like, if you know what the old X-15 looked like, a very long, slender craft with short wings on it, and a square exhaust that had little vanes in it.
Is it quite large?
Is it large?
Large, yeah.
Yes, it's quite large. It's a really overgrown thing. And there were a couple of people that came up who I described the sound to. One of them was John Andrews from the Testers Model Corporation, and they're always spying around to make the most recent models of the stealth and things like that. And he heard the exact sound that I described. Unfortunately, he couldn't record it, but that really got him lit up. And, he probably has more information about it than I do.
Yeah.
Okay, quick. When you listen to some abduction reports, whether or not people believe it or not, there seems to be a common thread of people being moved by blue beams of light. Did you ever talk to anybody in your work about technology that could explain that, or is there extrapolation of propulsion systems that you work on, principles that could explain something like that?
Any of the 3 gravity amplifiers could do that, could lift something off the ground. or for that matter, compact it into the ground. That's not a problem. And because the craft, in fact, can operate on one amplifier in Omicron mode, hovering, that would leave the other two amplifiers free to do anything. So I imagine they could pick up cows or whatever else they want to do. But you know, the craft that I worked on, there was absolutely no provision for anything to come in through the bottom of the craft or anything along those lines. So I don't know how, if that in fact does happen, it's in a completely different type of craft.
Does a blue sound, is a blue color consistent with what you would expect?
That's more consistent than the craft's glowing orange, because you know the interaction of the it should the nitrogen atmosphere glow blue.
Did the ship appear to be cast a piece of metal?
Not cast, and well, at least more it goes injection molded, because there was no sharp objects even where the seats meet. The floors curved, the top of everything. I think the analogy I gave, it looked like it was completely made of wax and heated till it melted, and then cooled down. Everything is completely perfectly rounded in. If in fact you're talking about something that's containing a high voltage field, that's exactly what you want to have to prevent the corona discharge from spraying off.
How can you focus a gravity wave on something that's so many millions and millions of miles away?
Well, first of all, I don't think they focus it that far away.
Oh.
Like I was talking with someone else, I think these trips are made in several small jumps, because the amount of energy required to do something like that it's not really not the amount of energy, but if you're looking at 3 amplifiers that focus down to something the size of a tennis ball, that the amount of precision that's required to move the amplifier with minimal deviation out there eventually is going to exceed anyone's level of technology. So if you're doing a jump of 1,000 miles, I mean, that's tremendously impressive. If you're doing a jump, I can't see them jumping a light year, much less 30. It just doesn't seem possible.
Do you have knowledge of, or can you speculate on what these small silver round appearing looking balls are that seem to be associated with crafts?
I never heard of them.
In the video surrounding UFOs in Mexico City during the eclipse, there's some very remarkable video of a pulsation of some sort of field surrounding these UFOs. Would that be an attribute, would that be attributable to the type of technology that you saw?
It's possible. An optical distortion?
Yeah, absolutely. You saw a pulse, and the polarization of the pulse seemed to be changing as well.
That's certainly possible.
Yeah, in your video that I saw last night, you were mentioning what you're reading is that the aliens had a capability of anesthetizing a human brain, and that could be broken by either rock music or stimulants.
Rock music. I think I did. Did I actually say that in the tape? Loud music. Okay. Yeah, apparently, whatever. I don't know what else to call it other than some sort of anesthetizing hypnosis along those lines. But anything that distracts attention at a high level, and certainly, some sort of stimulant drug or something that gets someone riled up would not permit that to happen. It's just like in modern hypnosis, or not really modern hypnosis, but in hypnosis in general, if you're not in a relaxed state, you're not going to get into that level of consciousness. So, if you're in a very alert, awake state, it's going to be hard to, cause that effect if in fact that is correct information.
What context was that information in?
That dealt with some of the biological effects of the aliens on, I think essentially on the human race is what it was, is how it was termed. This was I think it was in part of the autopsy reports, because they had the single organ they had in their body cross-sectioned and split up, and I think there was a comments in there about what different functions of the brains are, and I think that's where this came up, as they were trying to relate some unknown lobe of the brain to this function, but that's so typical. There again, like in particle physics, we don't know what it is, so hey, that's what does it. It's not necessarily true.
Yes, I hope you won't be offended by this question. I have to ask it to verify your bona fides. Have you ever gone by any other name?
Have I ever gone by any other name? No.
You've been Bob Lazar from birth.
As far as I know.
Mr. Lazar.
Yeah.
Do you have any other biological information on the aliens besides that they had one organ?
No, that's all I have, and that was essentially just from looking at a photograph.
So we don't know if they eat or drink or...
They probably do, but I don't.
This is really just a comment because you mentioned how you feel about Billy Meyer, that whole scene, but you said that the craft that you worked on looks just like the craft that from the Billy Meyer case.
One of them, yeah.
However, the beings that Billy Meyer supposedly was in contact with are supposedly full-size, like average human beings. And you said that the craft you worked on had chairs that a full person could not sit on.
But if you looked at the Billy Myers information, I think somewhere in there, maybe I've got this wrong because some of this stuff has gone through my head, that the people, the large people that apparently flew that craft, did not produce the craft. They think Billy Myers said it was obtained from creatures that were 2 meters tall or 1 meter tall or something along those lines.
Which craft was that? The craft that they,
The Billy Myers.
the case of Billy Meyer?
Yeah.
Well, they claim that they were operating the craft during those contacts.
Well, so were our guys for that matter, so I imagine they could be retrofitted, but, you know, I don't know, I can't go either way. I know the one that I worked on was small and was certainly uncomfortable for, you know, anything in the area of 5 to 6 feet to walk around in.
Bob, were the other 8 crafts given to us by the same aliens? And where did we get that?
I don't know, that's information that, you know, wasn't given to me. But I think as I said on my tape in an interview somewhere, one of them absolutely had a projectile hole through it. And the only thing, I don't believe it was shot down, this is a personal belief, but more along the lines, I believe it was stood up on its side just to see, you know, how the metal would react to a high-speed projectile going through it.
You were there for what, 4 to 6 months?
Yeah.
You had a lot of contact with security, obviously.
Yeah,
Did
too
you
much.
have,
Too much.
A regular escort, a same person? How did they act?
It depends. Each one
Did you ever
goes.
talk to them?
No, I never talked to them.
They,
I can't stand them. They only went so far. You know, if I was in the lab area and I went to the bathroom, the guy that came with me, or that was by the door went to the bathroom, he would go so far, and if I was leaving the perimeter, there would be another guy that went from that distance on.
was he armed?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Was he Army, Air Force? Can you tell?
I don't know.
Any insignias on his uniform?
No, he might have been, like I said, they had a dark blue uniform, most of the guys there, except a few of the people outside had that desert camo.
Headgear, beret, cap?
No, they didn't have any hats on.
There wasn't any insignia or anything on them, they just had the pistol and that was it?
Boy, there might have been, but you know, at the time I probably didn't pay much attention to it. I was trying to put the guy out of my mind, not study.
They never wanted to talk to you. Did they all seem like a stern Delta Force type, or were they like?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they weren't the least bit interested in what was going on. And, you know, what they've been briefed on, I have no idea. But you know, to them, it seemed like we were a nuisance. But you know, it's the reason that they're there. So I don't know.
Did you ever see any inside hardware for this machine? The nuts and bolts, wires, and obviously you probably did. Did it look like our nuts and bolts and wires we get in a hardware store, or what?
Well, as far as fastening devices, everything was formed together. There were no nuts and bolts. Wires, there were no connecting wires even between electrical systems.
So what was the course of energy? How did it go from one area to another area?
The best guess is essentially it operated like a Tesla coil does. It's a transmitter and essentially a receiver tuned to the transmitting frequency and receives the electrical power. And you know, there again, that's not real advanced technology. Tesla did that in the 30s, I think.
Lights on a console, were they plastic?
No, no lights. There were no lights.
Was the craft monolithic construction then?
Excuse me? I didn't hear.
Was the craft monolithic in construction?
Yes.